But right here, buddy, that's a tattoo.
Wow, that's David Dunham.
Fact or fiction?
Eric Dungey had no chance away. Flips it to Watkins again.
This is the Nachos and Analysis College Football Show, presented by Pump Monkey Septic Services.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 11 of the Nachos and Analysis College Football Show. Today is Thursday, November 2nd. The Tigers dropped back-to-back games for the first time since 2011 as they fall to NC State Saturday. I'm your host, Drew Archer, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matthew Johnson. How's it going, Matthew?
As good as it can be. Welcome, everybody, to the next newest episode of Will Clemson Make a Bowl Game in 2023?
Yeah, if I told you before the season started that Clemson would potentially miss a bowl game, what would go through your mind? Because that's where we're at right now.
I would have thought that there would have been some like catastrophic implosion, like some kind of scandal came out and like we had to fire half our coaching staff or something. That's what I would have thought it would have taken going into the season for us to be at the point that we are at now.
Well, don't forget about the scandal. Remember, Dabo Swinney is sleeping with one of the players' parents. I always like to casually drop that in conversation. The people, relax, everybody. His son is on the team. But yes, the Tigers drop a second consecutive game. It's their fourth loss of the season. Their third loss on the road this season. The Tigers will finish up the season with 3 home games prior to heading to Columbia. So,
before we get into, I was just going to ask you, before we get into talking about Clemson, NC State, I was going to ask you how your weekend in Auburn was.
My weekend in Auburn was nice. I'm glad I was there watching that matchup between cats and dogs rather than the Clemson matchup between cats and dogs. Auburn whooped up on Mississippi State, and it was a cool experience. I did jot down a couple of notes here of things, of observations in Auburn that I did want to throw out there. So if it was not written in the end zone and you didn't see the Tiger mascot running around everywhere, you would have no idea that Auburn's mascot was a tiger. Because they're all about the War Eagle stuff. Every cheer was about an eagle. There were no cheers about tigers. No roar, no tiger stripe, anything. I will say the problem is not limited to Clemson. I did see a girl wearing leopard print, so she doesn't know what cat she's pulling for. The tailgating was really, really cool. It's very different than Clemson. Everything's very spaced out, and most of the parking and tailgating is first come, first serve. So it's not like Clemson where everybody's right up on top of each other and assigned spots and that kind of stuff. And overall, it was a cool experience. Got to go see Toomer's Corner after the game with all the toilet paper everywhere. I got about halfway down the next block and realized there was toilet paper stuck to my shoe the whole time.
Did you get to throw any?
No, we did not come prepared. I was hoping to snag a random roll that someone forgot about or something, but it did not happen. We right after we walked to Toomer's Corner, my brother and my dad and we all split up. Me and my dad went to one restaurant, and my brother went to another restaurant to see which one had the shortest wait time. And as my dad's standing there with the hostess talking, getting all the information, I look up and Bruce Pearl's standing right behind my dad. And just before that, it was this massive dude that came walking. And I was like, I bet that's like a basketball recruit or something. And then literally a minute later, Bruce Pearl comes walking up. My dad turns around. I'm like, hey, do not step back. And this, of course, he takes a step back and accidentally almost bumps into him, but he turns around and it's Bruce Pearl in there. So that was kind of cool.
I have a question. Sorry for the uneducated, but who's Bruce Pearl?
The basketball coach there. He coached
gotcha.
at Tennessee, and he's been the coach at Auburn for a while now.
Gotcha. Sorry, Auburn fans.
You'd recognize him if you saw him. My final thing is, I know that Triple T's, and I think last year it was Study Hall, ends up on this Barstool Best Bar competition every year. And in previous trips to Auburn, I've been to Sky Bar before. I don't know when you went, Matthew, if you went to Sky Bar or
Yeah.
not. But the previous time that I went, they got like right when you walk in the front door, and then they got a cool upstairs, like open air bar outside. Then Devin was like, "Hey, do you want to go to the Boom Boom Room?" And I'm like, "What the heck is the Boom Boom Room?" And then we walk back, and then there's just like this entire other part of the building that I had no idea existed. This is going to sound like an exaggeration. I'm almost willing to bet that there were at least 3,000 to 4,000 people in that bar.
Are you serious?
It is massive. I had no idea how big. Like it stretched back to the next block. Like the entire building is long as a block. And the Boom Boom Room is a massive room, almost the size of a football field. And there were just thousands of people just packed in there. There's probably 10 to 15 bars spread out throughout that one bar. And I told Devin, I was like, well, no wonder Triple T's doesn't ever win this competition, competing against bars like the freaking Sky Bar in Auburn. But overall, it was really cool. I thankfully did not have to watch that Clemson game because the times of the Auburn game overlap with the Clemson game. I was following along on my phone with the ESPN app, and so a lot of our discussion today and insights are going to have to come from you.
Well, that's not very good because I didn't write that much down. But I had an interesting watching experience this week. Also, I went to Denver. I flew out on Friday. Woke up Saturday morning to 3 inches of snow on the ground and high of 25 on Saturday. So that was fun. We also got 6 more inches on Saturday, which was nice. That was fun. Me and Rachel, we went and watched it at the Clemson Club of Denver. There's a bar in Denver that does like a Clemson watch party. So we went and watched it there, and we actually ran into some people that Rachel had known from school. So that was kind of fun, but it was cool to watch it in an environment like that. But there was one NC State fan there also, and he was the only person cheering out loud out of anybody else in the bar. And I mean, I wanted to say something to him, but at the same time, Clemson didn't really have anything to cheer for, so I couldn't be like, you're the only one cheering in this bar, right? Because if Clemson was doing okay, I'm sure we would have been cheering a little bit at least.
Yeah. That reminded me, there was an NC State fan sitting 2 rows in front of us at the Auburn game. He was wearing an Auburn shirt, but then an NC State hat. So apparently we were all lost this weekend at the wrong place.
I'll put a video up on the screen, but I took a video, I think I sent it to you, of watching the game at the bar and then zooming in on the window outside, and it's snowing. It snowed for 6 or 7 hours straight in Denver on Saturday, so very interesting. It was nice to come back to the highs of 80s.
Well, I had no idea of the weather situation out there till you sent that video, which ultimately benefited me because I ended up taking the under in the Kansas City-Denver game as a result of the weather, which ended up cashing in. So I appreciate you sending me that video.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's get into this game a little bit. Tigers fall by a score of 24-17. They attempted to make a comeback, but it fell short. Clemson limited NC State to 202 yards offensively. Clemson has won its last 65 games when holding opponents to 202 yards or fewer. Its last such loss came in 1988 to none other than NC State. They held them to 185 yards in that 10-3 loss. Clemson held a 21-9 edge in first downs, but now has a record of 126-8 when totaling more first downs than its opponent since 2011.
And I'm pretty sure 3 of those 8 losses are this year.
I believe so. I believe you're correct. Clemson has been undefeated under Dabo Swinney in games in which it held opponents to single-digit first downs. It was Clemson's first loss when holding an opponent to 9 or fewer first downs since 2007, 9 against Virginia Tech in a 41-23 loss.
This is a pretty crazy stat to me. I don't understand how a team can score 41 points. That means they have to score at least 6 times and only have 9 first downs. That's pretty. We were giving up some big plays apparently in that one.
There had to have been some defensive touchdowns
Yeah, that too.
there.
I was thinking
Turnovers in the red zone.
I was thinking like 40-yard touchdowns where you're not getting any first downs on a drive, but scoring still.
The Tigers held NC State to 138 passing yards and has now held 4 straight opponents to fewer than 200 passing yards for the first time since a 10-game streak in 2019. Running back Phil Maffa rushed 16 times for 84 yards with 2 touchdowns. Will Shipley left the game in the second quarter after being knocked out in a helmet-to-helmet collision. He entered concussion protocol in his game-time decision for Notre Dame's game this week. Quarterback Cade Klubnik completed 33 of 50 passes for 263 yards. Klubnik's 33 completions were a career high and tied the 8th most in school history. They were most by a Clemson quarterback since the Sugar Bowl to end the 2020 season. Trevor Lawrence had 33 completions there. Tight end Jake Brenningstool was involved again this week. He recorded a career-high 8 receptions for 93 yards. Brenningstool combined for 13 receptions for 219 yards over Clemson's last 2 contests. Receiver Adam Randall matched his career high with 3 receptions, gaining 23 yards. Troy Stellato gained 29 yards on a career-high 7 receptions. Tight end Sage Ennis recorded a career-long 28-yard reception in the third quarter. On the defensive side of the ball, Wade Woodaz added a single-season career high with his 3rd sack of the season in the second quarter. Linebacker Barrett Carter recorded his 2nd sack of the season in the third quarter. The game concluded Clemson's streak of 161 games since losing consecutive games in a single season, a streak that dated back to 2011. The 161-game span was a Clemson record and has been the nation's longest active streak. It also ended Clemson's chances of extending the 10-win season record, which sucks. That's one that I've always kind of held on to with pride, the 10-win streak there, and that has officially come to an end.
Yeah, it's pretty disappointing that one's already out of the window in week 9. If you would have told me that that's how the season was going to go, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But one interesting point I wanted to point out about this game is in some of Clemson's other losses, and even in reading out some of the stats that you were just reading, on paper, Clemson has dominated a lot of the losses that they've incurred this season. But Clemson, I don't feel like this one felt that way because Clemson never led in this game. We went down 7-0 and never had a lead the entire game. I don't know. I don't even know.
I feel like this one felt more like the Duke game because Clemson did lead in a lot of statistical categories in that first game against Duke, but that game never felt like it at all.
Yeah, true. That's a good point. I felt like Clemson against Duke, like we were moving the ball better than Duke was, and we were just putting the ball in jeopardy and turning it over, and that's kind of the same thing here. There's one stat, I'm going to try to remember this off the top of my head. I saw it on the broadcast, but I couldn't get a screenshot of it today when I was rewatching, but Clemson is second in the nation, at least at this point in the broadcast, second in the nation in red zone trips per game in the country, but 109th in red zone scoring in the country. So the offense isn't broken. We're moving the ball. I mean, I wouldn't say we're moving the ball fine after this game because we didn't really, but overall we're doing enough to win except for the turnovers. It's really frustrating. I have one stat here. This is tweeted out by Matt Connolly, but he's accrediting the stat to David Hale, so I'm going to give both of them credit for it. 90 of Clemson's 262 designed runs this year have gone for 1 yard or less. That's 34% of our runs have gone for 1 yard or less, and that's 109th out of 133 teams in the country.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's really bad. After the pick six in oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, especially going into the season, we were hyping up Maffa and Shipley, and there were times earlier in the season where the offensive line looked like it was a little bit better than we thought it would be. So to hear that stat, you said it was 34% of our rushes go for 1 yard or less.
Yep.
That's insane.
Is really bad. And kind of a side note, but kind of on that point that you made about the offensive line, I don't know if you saw this screen capture going around after the game, but I saw a lot of Clemson fans posting it of one play where NC State rushed one player, and the screenshot is our entire offensive line standing looking at one defensive lineman who's playing like a spy type responsibility on this play, and all 5 of our linemen are looking at this one guy, and then coming around the backside about to hit Cade is a free rusher that nobody even saw. And our offensive line is bad. I saw a bunch of people, I think it might have been the sidelines or fourth quarter Clemson account, was just like going through the staff directory after the game on Saturday, just posting people's like staff page, and was like, this guy needs to go, and did that for like a bunch of people. And I agree on the offensive line point. But after the pick 6 in the third quarter, minus, if you take away points off turnovers that like we gave up, the score would have been Clemson up 7-3, but instead we're down 17-7 at this point. So I don't think it comes down to anything except for turnovers. But wrapping up a little bit on a brighter note, I am impressed with how the team fought back while being down 24-7 and then bringing it back to 24-17. I didn't know that we had that in us, and it's nice to see that we can fight back in a game, I guess. But it's just too little too late. And then I told Drew this earlier, but I stopped my rewatch of the game after we went down 24-7 because it was too embarrassing. I know the rest of the game we were going to actually do something, but just the fact that we were down 3 scores to a mid ACC team and NC State is just embarrassing. This is not where the program needs to be right now.
I mean, to your point, if the turnovers are cleaned up, you might still have a loss, but I mean, I think you probably still lose to Florida State because turnovers really weren't a factor there in that game, if memory serves me correctly. But I don't know what has changed or what you even do about it, but it is just something that just continuously bites you in the butt. Tiger Illustrated posted on Twitter, it was basically along the line saying that teams have figured out Clemson, and to the sense of all you got to do is play your game, don't do anything too crazy, and just wait for Clemson to mess up and take advantage. And that seems to be what has happened in a lot of these games this season. These teams are doing just enough to hang around to stay in the game, and NC State's case, lead most of the game or all of the game, and just wait for Clemson to mess up.
Yeah, on your point about the Florida State game, turnovers weren't a problem in that game, except for there was a point where we were in scoring position, about to go up 2 scores, and then that fumble on Kate, or Kate got hit blindsided and fumbled, and they returned that. That's the only turnover I can think of.
I can't forget about that one. Yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah, that was a big one there. But yeah, that's like we said last week. That is who this team is, and I don't look for it to change. Are we going to just go ahead and assume we're going to have 2 turnovers every game going forward? I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah, I think so, because maybe in the first couple games it was like a technical thing that we just weren't doing the right things the right way in practice and on the field. But I think after that, and it became a pattern, it broke morale, and I think it's more of a mental thing now that we just can't get out of our own way at this point, because like we've been talking about, we've had enough offensive production to win every game this year.
And at this point, you have to wonder about the team's morale in the locker room there. Like, at this point, you got 4 losses before Halloween. I can't imagine things are all that great in the locker room at the moment, and stuff. Having a mentality like that is definitely not going to help with the turnovers in the mental state. And teams know now, obviously, ball security is not a strength of Clemson. They're just going to go for that ball every time.
Yeah, and All like you kind of said earlier, but all the other team has to do is not turn the ball over, and we're gonna give them good field position and a chance to score. I think by now we're over 70 points given up off turnovers this season, which is incredible. That's probably close to the amount of points our team has scored.
Yeah. Yep. And then this for a month now, this stat, it's always the first stat in the game notes that Ross Taylor sends out each week in regards to the game. Dabo has been trying to get over that hump as the winningest coach at Clemson. Is it Coach Howard?
Yeah, it is Coach Howard. It is Frank Howard.
Yeah. Yeah. So been sitting on this for a month. I don't know. Feel like that if he were to achieve that this Saturday in Death Valley against Notre Dame, it's probably not going to feel the same as he had hoped a month ago when this became an opportunity.
Yeah, I don't have confidence that Dabo breaks this record this season. Like, he only needs one more, and I think we have just as likely of a probability to go 4-8 as we do to win one more game.
Can you imagine a season where Clemson does not make a bowl? I don't remember the last time that happened.
2004 is the last time I can think of, but we were bowl eligible. We just had a self-imposed bowl ban because of the fight against South Carolina that year.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe we didn't make a bowl before. I think we might have made a bowl since then. That's an interesting stat that we need to look up for next week's episode.
Yeah. Because, I mean, at this point in the season last year, you were still in the college football playoff conversation. And have you not lose the game to South Carolina last year, you would have been in the college football playoff. And to go from that scenario to where we're currently at now, where you still have Notre Dame, North Carolina, a rivalry game with South Carolina, and a Georgia Tech team that keeps beating teams they're not supposed to. It's kind of doom and gloom right now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any bright side to the rest of Clemson season. I think all four of these teams should be favored against Clemson on the remaining of the schedule. I know North Carolina's dropped their last two to lower level opponents, but those two teams that beat North Carolina are just as good or better than Clemson. So
time will tell. So you ready to turn the page on this god-awful loss to NC State?
Yeah, let's move on to Week 9 games.
Week 9 games, there was some good games. Like the Clemson game, I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of them, just kind of following along on the phone. But Oklahoma gets upset by Kansas. What Kansas has done the last couple years has actually been really fun to watch. I hate that it came against Brent Venables and Oklahoma there, but the Sooners dropped their first game this season. They fall 38-33. Did you get a chance to keep an eye on this one?
Yeah, this was maybe the only other game other than the Clemson game that I got to watch like a good amount of because it was playing or it was finishing around the same time Clemson was starting and kind of around that point. So I did get to catch the end of it. It was a really good game and heartbreaker for Venables, but I don't think it's anything to hold your head about because, like you said, this isn't the Kansas team that we've all known of the past decade. This is a different team with a lot of talent on it, and not to mention that Brent Venables has already beat his win total from last season in his second year as head coach, and they only won 6 games last year, and it's week 8 or after week 8 they've already beaten that total. So I don't think it's anything to hang their heads about. Oklahoma's future is bright.
Yeah, and I don't know what the deal is with Oklahoma and Auburn, but that was the only game that actually kept doing live cut-ins on the video board during like commercial breaks. They kept cutting back over to that game to show updates from it. So I don't know if there's some animosity there between Auburn and Oklahoma, but the crowd got a kick out of that when they showed the final score. Georgia Tech, I don't know if you saw this or not. Georgia Tech is undefeated in even number games and winless in odd number games, meaning they've lost games 1, 3, 5, and 7, but they've won games 2, 4, 6, and 8. They have Clemson on their schedule for game 10 and Georgia on their schedule for game 12. So they could knock off the Tigers and the Bulldogs.
That would be pretty cool. I hope they keep that streak alive, honestly, because that'd be almost like a South Carolina story from last year where just you have a mid to low level season and then right at the end of the year you pull off 2 big upsets. Not that the Clemson game this year would be an upset, but I think right now, like a lot of ACC teams are still excited to beat Clemson just because they haven't for so long. And even though we're obviously not very good right now, it still is the satisfaction of getting one over on the guys that were, beating you down for the last decade. So
yeah. Everybody wants a piece of Clemson.
Yeah, I did want to also point out about this UNC game that this is further evidence for my self-cannibalization factor fiction last week about that the ACC is full of equal teams. With North Carolina dropping 2 back-to-back, we thought they might be the second best team in the conference, and then they lost 2 to 2 of maybe the worst teams in the conference. So kind of interesting. I think the ACC, it's a toss-up this year. I did see, it might have been David Hale again, had posted a tweet, and I think I actually bookmarked it on the Nachos account, and I'm going to keep talking very slowly here and see if I can pull it up. Yes.
I'd look for you, but I don't know where bookmarks are.
It is David Hale who said, I'm not going to read all the scenarios, but there is a possibility. Actually, it's over now, I think, since UNC lost to Georgia Tech. But before this past week, there was a possibility that there would be a 5-way tie at 6-2 for the second spot in the ACC championship game. But that was contingent on UNC beating Georgia Tech. So I don't think that's in the window now, but there might still be like a 3 or 4-way tie for second as of now. So
yeah, the ACC has stepped it up, and it seems like any week, any team can beat anybody. And that's evident by what Georgia Tech's done. That's evident by what Virginia did last week to UNC. There's been a lot of good football. There's been a lot of bad football this season in the ACC. Headed out west, former Clemson Tiger DJU, Oregon State gets upset by Virginia, 27-24. I was
Arizona.
able to kind of watch a little bit. What did I say? Sorry.
Virginia.
Oh, Virginia. Arizona. They did not play Virginia. Got upset by Virginia. Oregon State was upset by Arizona, 27-24. So first loss of the season for Oregon State.
I didn't get to catch this one. Me reading the show notes was the first time me seeing that Oregon State loss. So that one sucks for DJ. That's in 2 of the best Clemson former products lost their first games this week. Brent Venables and DJ Uyunglele. Okay, well, that reminded me of something else I wanted to say from watching the broadcast of the game. I completely forgot that Dakari Collins transferred to NC State. If you remember him, Drew, he played receiver for us for 2 seasons and transferred away. He caught a pass at NC State and had a really good special teams tackle during the game against Clemson.
I forgot that too. I did not remember that. So he only had one completion.
He might have had 2, but at least up until the point when I was rewatching today, he had 1, and it was. But there's one. I don't know. I guess you haven't watched the game, but there's one punt that NC State had where Hamp Green, for God knows why, was our return man all game, and he neglected to call for a fair catch on this one. But I don't understand why, because Dakari Collins was flying down the field untouched right at him. Hamp Green didn't call a fair catch and just got drilled by Dakari Collins. So he was probably lucky that Dakari Collins is a wide receiver and not a linebacker, because Hamp Green probably would have died.
Yeah, that's one of those things that perplexes me, that we keep putting him back there.
Yeah, but I don't want to hear the excuse that we don't have anybody better or more effective, because I think I could be just as effective as Hamp Green on a D1 football field.
And you got some size on him.
I got a couple inches on him and probably like 60 pounds.
All right. Before we move on to our Twitter poll, we got to shout out our sponsor, Pump Monkey Septic Service. They're owned and operated by Clemson alumni Alan Powell, and their service Clemson in the upstate area. If you have a septic tank issue or need a quote, and just have somebody come out and look at it, give Alan Powell a call at 864-710-2211. They're on Facebook. They're on Instagram. They're going to be the ones that are going to come out on a Saturday or a Sunday when bigger companies aren't willing to come out to your property. So remember, Pump Monkey, 864-710-2211. When the dump's funky, call Pump Monkey.
Twitter polls.
All right, our Twitter poll of the week. Again, if you don't follow us on Twitter, at Nachos_analysis, give us a follow. That's where we post this poll each week for you to get your voice heard. This week's question, a little bit more humorous, because quite frankly, when I was sitting up last night doing these show notes for this week, I couldn't come up with something. So this is what we ended up with. Things you would rather do than watch Clemson host Notre Dame this week. After having 4 losses already on the season before the month of November, there's got to be some things you'd rather do than watch a highly ranked Notre Dame team come into town. So the options were be waterboarded, run a marathon, eat kale, and be a South Carolina fan. Before Matthew and I reveal our results, I'll read some of the listener responses. Mike B says, this is a bad take. I'm still driving from Mississippi to watch the Tigers. Major changes need to happen to be successful, but always a fan of my university. Hey, Mike, I'm still going to be there. I'm still going to watch, but it might be a little painful at times. We got Matt gets in and says, I'm only guaranteed 4 more times to see the Tigers play, so I'm always excited to watch. Clemson Addict says never number 4, which would be a South Carolina fan. He said, I'd rather go 0-12 than that. He Tiggins, I'll always get a kick out of anytime this account, He Tiggins, interacts with us. I just love that name. He just responded, LOL, what? And then Clemson Victory gets in and says, why does everyone think we're going to lose? They had 13 points on Louisville and 13 points on Duke with under 2 minutes left. They had 14 points on Ohio State. They have struggled severely with any team that has had a solid defense. They also have to come to Death Valley. We're winning. So Clemson Victory is confident the Tigers will be leaving with a victory this weekend. Matthew, which of these options would you rather do than watch Clemson face Notre Dame Saturday?
Before I answer, I'll say something about Clemson Victory. I believe you said the account is who said that last reply. That tweet got sent in a family group message today by one of my family members saying that this person is delusional. Because I kind of had a similar theory going into Florida State, that for all the doomers saying that Florida State was going to blow us out or that we didn't have a chance, that look at what Florida State had done against some other teams that weren't good, and look, we were able to hang in with them. I think this is completely different, though. I would choose in this poll all of the above. My bottom 2 choices, though, are running a marathon or being a South Carolina fan. I'd rather be waterboarded and eat kale. Well, kale is good. I don't know why that one is so high, but I'd rather be waterboarded than be a South Carolina fan or run a marathon, so I'm going with that one.
Yeah, coincidentally enough, I Googled like this question because I knew that there had been things like this before, and ironically, the first search in Google had a list of 100 things you'd rather do than watch Auburn football or Alabama, or no, it was Arkansas. I think it was Arkansas football. So it was a lot of it was geared toward SEC things, and the option instead of be a South Carolina fan in their little webpage there was be an Auburn fan. So I got a kick out of that, and I took a lot of these from that list. I'm with you. I like kale. You just got to prepare it right, and kale is not the kale of the '90s where you go to Ryan's Steakhouse and they just put it on your plate for decoration. I think I'd rather be waterboarded than run a marathon. I've never been waterboarded before, but I have ran, and a marathon is a long time. So I'm going to go with be waterboarded. Maybe some Al Qaeda might have differing opinions than I do on that one, but who knows? The poll results. The polls, they did not agree with us on kale. The number one answer was eat kale at 38%, followed by waterboarding at 27%. Run a marathon at 25%, and there's 10% of people out there that said they'd rather be a South Carolina fan than watch the game Saturday. I don't think I'd ever go that far.
Yeah, because if you're a South Carolina fan, that means you're going to have to watch an even worse game. Well, I guess South Carolina's going to win this week, hopefully. They played Jacksonville State, so this might be South Carolina's last win of the season, or at least until we come to town in November.
I hope it's their last win of the season. I went from not rooting for them, but just hoping that my preseason pick that they would get over, was it 6 wins or 7 wins? I'm now past that. I just want them to lose every game from here on out. So
it's going to be funny if they come if it's like going into the week of the Clemson game and they're 1 win away from it, and they need to beat Clemson for your preseason pick to hit.
That would be my luck this season. That would be my luck. All right. In a moment, we've talked about it for a couple weeks now, but Ryan Kantor is going to join the show. So appreciate him taking the time to hop on with us. So without further ado, here's Ryan Kantor. All right, today we're joined by Ryan Kantor of Tigernet and Shakin the Southland. Ryan, it's been a long time coming. I feel like I reached out to you and canceled on you, and then I talked about inviting you on an episode, but forgot to actually invite you on an episode. So it's finally coming to fruition. So thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Yeah, no, I owe you. I think Matthew created my logo for my YouTube channel, and you were a guest talking baseball, so glad to get you back.
Absolutely. So I'm going to hit you with a hard-hitting question right off the bat. What's wrong with Clemson?
How do you want me to go with this right now?
That was kind of a joke question that we had written out. We kind of thought we would get that reaction, but more specifically, more talking about the NC State game, like what are kind of your takeaways from that? I know me and Drew talked on this episode already about turnovers still being such a bad issue, and but I was kind of interested to see what your perspective was on this NC State game.
Yeah, I mean, so sticking specifically to the NC State game, right? If you make that field goal before half, then you avoid the blunder at the end of the game. When you settle for the field goal, you go for it. 50-50, you get it, and then you're tied, right? So that's how big that missed field goal was. If you don't have the pick six, which is probably the offensive line's fault, you probably win the game and that's not even a discussion. So again, they make a few crucial mistakes, pretty much always on offense, and that's why they lose. They're just not talented enough to make a ton of mistakes. I mean, you think like that 2016 game they lost to Pitt, how many mistakes do they have to make to actually lose that one game? I mean, they just picks in the ends. I mean, they were doing crazy stuff before they finally lost a game. They could get away with it so many times. That 2016 game against NC State, they were just horrible, and they still pulled it out. And they don't have that huge of a talent advantage right now. Dabo's never been, he's not Mario Cristobal, but he's never been a great in-game like strategist. And it doesn't matter when you just are massively more talented and better than everyone. But when it's on the edge, that stuff costs you a game.
Absolutely. So if Ryan Kantor was king of Clemson for the day one, what are your priorities with fixing this program?
Yeah, look, I can't do what Dabo's done in the past. Obviously, he's a Hall of Fame coach, and honestly, like I wouldn't be a good coach, right? I don't know the X's and O's and that level of detail. Dabo's ability to just relate to high school kids, like he can't do that, let alone recruit them, right? But I do feel like there's like some stuff where like let me be. You don't even have to pay me. Just let me be your veto guy. Like just let me tell. No, that's very dumb. That's a very bad decision. Like I don't need football experience. I don't need to be an analyst for 10. Some of the stuff's obvious, right? Like for 3 years we just don't use the portal at all. And I'm not saying we should be Florida State, but like coming into the year, I was saying we should probably get a defensive end and a wide receiver. Seemed very obvious to me. And Dabo, on the other hand, believes in Maskell and Bo Collins and Adam Randall. Like, why am I right and he's wrong? He's watching them in practice. He was a wide receiver. He was a wide receivers coach. And my analysis of Adam Randall is better than his. To me, I feel like he's such a relationship guy that it's actually like he can't see as clearly because he knows him personally. He knows his mom. He loves the kid. Whereas to me, it's more like they're fantasy players, right? So I'm just looking at them completely objectively. And I think it's not like he forgot football. So that's the only thing that makes sense to me is he's not looking at it as objectively as we are as fans. 'Cause I've never met the guys, right? So it's easy for me to be objective. So yeah, so you're talking about things I would do. I would get the best coaches. I wouldn't get guys that I have personal relationships with. Partially because I think it's awkward. I wouldn't want to hire my best pal to report to me because if he's bad, that's could be super awkward and ruin a friendship. So I wouldn't do that. I would get the best coaches available. Imagine if Sam Pittman from Arkansas is available, elite wide offensive line coach. I mean, I would love to have him on staff somehow. And I would, and it's awkward now because it's kind of made it awkward. But I think you have to replace starters who are currently starters that on offense that are not great. They're okay. They're not bad players. They don't stink, but they're not as good as guys in the portal. Find guys who are better than them, especially if they're not seniors, right? And say, hey, you're gonna have to sit for a year. You're not the best option, right? That's gonna feel icky, and it's not gonna be as fun for Dabo at least. But I think those are some obvious things he's gonna have to do if he wants to actually be more than a fringe top 25 program moving forward.
You bring up the awkwardness of hiring former players and people well. I can't remember where exactly I saw it this past week, but someone brought up the point that don't hire someone that you can't fire. And Dabo surrounded himself with a lot of people that if you have to go and fire those guys, there's going to be a lot of awkward conversations. It kind of leads into my next question. You brought up Sam Pittman. I think the two personalities of Dabo and Pittman on the same coaching staff would be quite interesting. But what staff changes do you see actually coming to fruition this offseason?
I mean, who knows, right? Like, I mean, I could totally speculate, and I will for fun with you, but I think there's a lot of guys who are on 1 year, like this is their last year of their contract. So he wouldn't have to fire them per se, right? He can just give them a different contract for a different role. I think that's probably feasible. I mean, the offensive line guys are regressing. Their PFF grades are going down a lot of the time. Offensive line's a huge issue. The recruiting class right now isn't good. So I think that is not a good sign if you're the offensive line coach. Wide receiver, they do have great wide receivers coming in, right? So that's a check in Tyler Grisham's box. And the wide receiver play, they don't have elite wide receivers, but I guess what I'd want to know is, did Tyler Grisham believe that Bo Collins and Adam Randall were a great 1-2 punch on the outside? If he believed that, I think that's a commentary on him. If he was saying, Coach, we need to go get someone, these guys are good quality players, but they're not national championship starters, and Dabo said, no, we don't do that, then you can't blame Grisham, right? So that's where I don't like to go after individual coaches, but I do like to go after the process, right? Like CJ Spiller, he's never coached, never an analyst, nothing like that. He's a track coach in high school. You bring him in, he's an unpaid intern for a year, you make him the coach. Do I think he's a bad coach? Not really. I think he's actually done okay for the most part. I mean, there's some things I critique. Shipley's not developed for one. But I don't think he's terrible. I do think that process of how you chose him is terrible, right? He's your marquee recruit that you love and have a relationship with, so you bring him in and rush him into the role. That's a bad process. It's not a knock on him. That's a knock on the way Dabo's doing things, which is different.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. Moving on a little bit to this coming week, me and Drew just recorded a very pessimistic podcast about this upcoming game, but what are you kind of looking for / expecting coming up against Notre Dame this week?
I mean, this is probably the least I've ever looked forward to a Clemson game. I mean, I've got to watch it because I want to be able to talk about it intelligently and write about it, and I don't know, I can't. If the game's on, I have to be watching. I'll be going crazy otherwise. But I mean, they physically manhandled us last year, and we brought 4 guys back on the offensive line. Obviously, one's hurt, Walker Parks, but we're somehow worse on the offensive line. We were told we had all this depth, and we're struggling at right guard. We had to move a left tackle there because our both backup options have struggled. And Mitchell Mays and Harris Sewell, really, really low PFF grades at right guard, even though we're supposedly 10, 11 deep, which obviously we're not. So I don't see how they don't manhandle us physically even more than before. We're at home, so that's better. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to go into it expecting to lose by 2 touchdowns or more, and just kind of reset my expectations. And if we do better than that, then at least I'm not miserable. Coming in, I picked us before the year. I said we'd go 11-1. Maybe my one loss, or not maybe, but my one loss that I picked was actually at NC State, because I kind of thought it was a trap game in between Miami and Notre Dame, so we'd win both those. So I got that one right, but I've been disappointed 3 other times where I was expecting something very different. So now I'm changing my expectations.
Yeah, I think that's about where both me and Drew are at right now. Is I'm just kind of going to this game as a fan and looking to have fun at the game and not worry, and that's not dependent on the outcome of the game. I know going to Clemson, I've been going my whole life, and I have a great time going to Clemson football games no matter what happens, because I grew up in the Tommy Bowden era, so I've been through it. So I think that's
Tommy Bowden never had a year worse than 4-4 in the ACC, so it might be worse than any year.
Yeah, we're creeping up on that. So.
Yeah.
Ryan, you've been very outspoken on the transfer portal and Clemson's kind of lack of utilizing it. Obviously, there's some holes in the roster. In last offseason, they made attempts at a couple guys that just didn't come to fruition. Do you see them having a little bit more success and going at it a little bit harder this year? And which position group might you see a little bit of improvement through the portal?
Yeah, I do. I think last year, I don't think Dabo is against ever using the portal no matter what. I think he's been tentative to replace a guy who is a starter, who's not great but isn't bad and does things the right way and is all in and tries, and doesn't deserve hey, you're not all in, you should be replaced. It's just you're not going to win a championship with that kind of guy. He's been hesitant to replace those guys, but when you go 6-6 or something, 7-5, we'll see where we end up. I think it's a lot easier to do that, right? So I also think that last year and it's not totally his fault, so let's give him a little grace. The COVID year is really weird. He didn't know. I think no one expected both Rook and Tyler Davis to come back, right? And Jalen Phillips and Sheridan Jones both came back. Obviously, different spots in the secondary, but I think he just didn't manage the roster and didn't see all that. So he kind of, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but wasted a scholarship on Paul Tyson. And then I've heard I was really hoping they'd go after his name was DuBose, receiver from Charlotte, or Ali Jennings, receiver from Old Dominion. There was a lot of options. Obviously, Jamari Thrash at Louisville was killing it, and he was at Georgia State, so I think we can recruit at Louisville's level, right? But he didn't see that he had room. Obviously, those spots open up, but he's very conservative about kicking guys off scholarship who are former walk-ons. So he played a little too aggressive in giving out scholarships to freshmen, to not save space, and then too conservative with his expectations of attrition. This year, the recruiting class is small. There's room. I think you'll see people transfer out after a 6-6 tumultuous year where it's probably not a lot of fun to be a Clemson football player right now. So I think there'll be plenty of room. I expect him to take a defensive end. If not, Cade Denhoff is your starter next year. So I think if he doesn't take a defensive end, then he's not giving us his best at that point. Best is the standard, and that means giving your best, not going 15-0, right? But I think if he's not trying to get a defensive end, that's not his best. I think maybe Trotter maybe comes back, but if not, I think you got to get a linebacker, maybe a safety, depending on who leaves. Mickens, I feel like Mickens and Venables could both be back, and then you still have Sherrod Koval and Khalil Barnes. So that may be a spot we're okay. On offense, I'd love to see him go out and get a wide receiver. Otherwise, you're just putting a lot of pressure on Wesco to be a day one starter. And I think that's unnecessarily risky. And then the biggest question is you're going to bring back a ton of guys in the offensive line. Putnam's gone, but you could bring back 4 others. Are you willing to replace one of them who's, let's just say, doesn't have a good PFF grade this year with a guy who's older than him and traditionally better than him, over the course of their career? Are you willing to say you were a starter last year, but you were okay? You don't stink. You're not a bad kid. You're not failing to be all in, but this kid's better than you, so we're going to bring him in. I don't know if he'll go that far, but I would be stunned if he brought 0 guys in, especially at defensive end.
Yeah, I'm really looking for an offensive line upgrade, and I know me and Drew don't pay that much attention to recruiting, so we're not sure about exactly what the offensive line incoming class is looking like. But I like one point that you made is that a lot of fans probably overlook is that it's easy to make these roster management decisions without that personal aspect that you get from recruiting these kids in high school. And, kind of Dabo's main goal is to make them into Clemson men and stuff like that. So I think he does lose his focus on the output on the field a lot, and focuses more on that off the field type stuff and keeping those personal relationships growing.
You're definitely right. And it's funny because it cuts both ways. When that was still true, but we were winning national championships, I remember I wrote an article, I forgot the exact title, but something along the lines of like, it means more. I definitely didn't use the SEC phrase, but something like it means more when you win the right way or something like that. And it was about that. Like, we're doing everything the right way. We're not cutting players. We're growing them as men. Talked about how like one of the players got baptized after doing something wrong. And he genuinely does care about them as people. And he would say that winning national championships isn't the main goal. And that rang like so beautiful and was like, take my money up day. This is great. But now I was just listening to him pretty recently on the Family Values podcast with David Pollock. And he said, winning's not the number one goal. And now when you're 6-6 and you say that, and they weren't that bad at the time, but like now it sounds really bad. So I'm admitting my own hypocrisy there, right? Like you're winning and character's number one. It's amazing. Even if you're not winning championships, but when you're bad and you're not acknowledging that is still what you're paid for, then to me it sounds bad.
Yeah, true.
Yep. It's all about perspective. Fans are willing to put up with or enjoy things like that when you are winning, but when you're saying things like that in the midst of a 4-4 season, it comes across a little differently.
Especially the best is the standard quote. When you're 4-4, it doesn't sound very good to have that plastered on the wall everywhere.
Yeah, well, the most true quote was the fun is in the winning. Like,
yeah.
We're not a lot of fun right now, right? I wonder if he'd say that again.
We actually talked about that. One of our Fact or Fictions this week was, is Clemson football is not fun anymore. And I kind of brought up that point is that if the fun is in the winning, then you're right. But then I also brought up the fact of growing up in a Tommy Bowden era and having a great time during that. So it just depends on your perspective of where you're looking at it from.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, I really appreciate you taking some time and joining us. Always great following along with you on Twitter and YouTube, and you put out great content, so I appreciate it. To all our listeners, check them out on Twitter, Tigernet Shakin the Southland. Ryan, we got to do this again, maybe baseball season.
Yeah, definitely check me out on YouTube. Just search my name, Ryan Kantor. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. All right, thanks to Ryan for joining the show. If you do not already, give him a follow on Twitter at Ryan_Kantor, writer for Tigernet and Shakin the Southland. Does a lot of good videos as well on YouTube. So thanks again, and it's always a pleasure chatting with Ryan. Matthew, before we hit that transition, I did want to point out something. We just got an email from Ross Taylor. The ACC has announced its conference schedule through 2030 just now. But we know all of our conference games, which usually we did in the previous setup when we had divisions, but now with no divisions, it's kind of up in the air each year. So next year, tell me what you think about this. At home, we get Louisville, NC State, Virginia, and Stanford. Away, hit Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, and Florida State.
It's not horrible. It could be worse, but I am hoping that the ACC is going to have to restructure a lot of these schedules after us and Florida State hit the road.
Yeah, and what we've produced this season and put out there on the football field is not, in my opinion, helped our case. But so, yeah, Stanford coming to Clemson next season. In 2025, SMU will come to town, and then the Tigers will travel to California in 2026 to take on Cal.
Interesting. That's another game another reason why I think I want to leave the ACC even more now, but for a different reason than I did at the beginning of the season, and I want to get away from SMU because if trends keep happening how they're happening now, we're going to get destroyed by them every year.
I'd be interested to see what their conference schedule looks like starting next season, how much travel, especially Cal and Stanford, are going to have to do.
I don't even want to think about what their budgets are going to have to go up to.
Yeah. All right, fact or fiction?
Fact or fiction?
Fact or fiction, Cade gets benched at some point in the remaining 4 games.
I don't know. I'm going to say fact, but I don't think it's going to do anything because we don't have anybody better on the roster. Maybe CV, Chris Vezina, but right now on the depth chart, Hunter Helms is number 2, and if we pull Cade, Hunter Helms is going in, and I think the offense is going to be worse without Cade. So yes, it will happen because Cade just isn't doing what he needs to do to win ball games right now. So I think at some point you got to take a look at somebody else. Like Dabo would have never given DJ 4 losses to work with before bench.
Something that I was reading on Tiger Illustrated that someone pointed out that I found kind of interesting. The way Clemson recruits at the quarterback position, like they'll tell that quarterback, hey, if you commit, we're going to shut down our recruiting for quarterbacks. You're going to be our guy. And that goes counterintuitive to every other position that you recruit for. And Dabo's always talking about the competition, iron sharpening iron, and the best guy will play. If you're a quarterback looking to come at Clemson, you don't have competition. You don't have to worry about if you have a bad game, someone stepping up and taking your spot, because that's the situation that Cade finds himself in right now. I'm going to say fact. I don't think he's going to get benched to the point where he's not going to start a game, but I could see a scenario where he throws a couple picks, puts a team in a bad position, and he gets pulled mid-game at some point, preferably the Georgia Tech game. I don't want to see it any other game, honestly.
I wouldn't be surprised if it happens this week against Notre Dame because I could just see it in my mind of Cade getting maybe a little ahead of himself and turning the ball over early. And I mean, what do you do at that point when your quarterback isn't giving you a good chance to win? Like maybe at that point, if we're turning the ball over as frequently as we have been, then maybe Hunter Helms is the answer because he'll probably protect the ball better.
He has a 100% interception rate when facing Notre Dame. If you remember, he came in and threw that interception last season and immediately got pulled right back out and put DJ back in.
Cade does or Hunter Helms?
Wasn't that Cade or was it Cade?
Oh, I thought you were talking about Hunter Helms. So hopefully that doesn't continue.
No. All right, fact or fiction, Clemson basketball will finish better both nationally and in conference than the football team this season.
I'm going fact again. I think at this rate, all the basketball team has to do is win 2 conference games, and then you outdid the football team this year. So I know the schedule's a little different. You play twice as many games in basketball, but I guess if they win 4 conference games, then they outdid the football team. So I think it is right up the alley of Brad Brownell's squad to get that done and make Clemson a basketball school.
Yeah, this is big facts. The basketball team, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, they were projected to finish 4th in the ACC this season. PJ Hall, first team preseason All-American. This is setting up for a good season for Brad Brownell and Clemson basketball. Clemson basketball is also something that I do not get invested in, and I just watch from afar because I don't like dealing with the heartbreak and the ups and downs of these basketball teams. But I feel like I can say confidently that this squad is going to outperform both in conference and nationally this football team. Fact or fiction, Clemson football isn't fun anymore.
I don't know. My first response is to say no, but then I go back to the past decade, and Clemson's motto was that the fun is in the winning, that everything else is hard work, but when you win is when you get to have fun. But if that's the case, then we're not having very much fun right now. But I'm leaning towards disagreeing with this because I grew up in the Bowden era where Clemson going 8-4 was considered a good season. And I was still having a great time following Clemson football at that time and probably loved it even more than I do now. So I'm going to say fiction here.
I was originally going to say fact, but I think I am going to go fiction there, similar to you growing up a Clemson fan, spending every Saturday in the fall up there. I may not like what I see on the football field Saturday, but I'm going to have a fun time in Clemson. And to your point about fun being in the winning, I think we've just got spoiled as Clemson fans because, like you, I grew up Tommy Bowden, Tommy West, and those were not fun times, but I still enjoyed it and love Clemson football. So I'm trying to rework my perspective and be thankful for the last decade of Clemson football while also trying to enjoy what we're currently experiencing. So I'm going to say fiction. Clemson still is fun.
Yeah, I agree. And damn it, I did it again. You said something that I had something to say to, and then as you were finishing, I lost it because you said something else. So I'm just not on it today. I'm sorry, guys.
Well, last week I had the flu brain, so you got jet lag.
Well, speaking of the flu brain, it really worked out for you, and we'll take that into our Pick'em contest.
Weekly picks.
Yeah, it was a big week for me. I did not have a lot of confidence in myself. I think I mentioned as we were throwing these picks out last week, when I got to my under pick, Air Force Colorado State, I was like, I don't remember making that pick. I don't remember why I decided to go with that pick. And that made me feel like this week was just going to be a colossal failure. That was far from the case. I got all 4 picks right this week. I don't know I know it hasn't happened this season, and I can't remember a time last season that I got all 4 picks correct. So super pumped about that. Matthew, you went the opposite direction.
Yeah, Drew really had his flu game last week. If anybody here is a Jordan fan, and Drew had his 1997 flu game last week where he came in sick but still performed, put up the numbers. So I think Jordan had like 48 or something in that game. So congrats.
Which we since have learned it might have been a food poisoning game instead of a flu game.
Yeah, that's true. But not in your case. We'll say you went through the full flu and still prevailed. But yeah, none of my picks hit last week. I had Ohio State at Wisconsin. That was Ohio State favored by 14.5. They won by 14. Not mad about it.
That was brutal.
Yeah. My underdog pick missed wildly. Georgia State was only a 1.5 point underdog to Georgia Southern, and they got their ass beat. I think it was like a 30-point loss, which I could have seen it coming. I was just having hope for the sake of that rivalry that it wouldn't be so one-sided. Also had Colorado UCLA on the over. That was a lot more defensive than I was expecting. And the Oklahoma Kansas game went over while I picked the under, and that over hit pretty early in the fourth quarter too, so wasn't even that close. So just trying to get back on track this week.
Yeah, big week in the season total shakeup. Matthew's still at 16 points. I move ahead for the first time this season with 20 points, so a 4-point lead. My favorite pick, Duke versus Louisville. I knew that was going to be contingent on if Riley Leonard played. Louisville absolutely smoked them 23-0. I had a strange feeling about this Clemson-NC State game. State was only a 10-point underdog. That was easy money right there. Tennessee-Kentucky. We were actually at Sky Bar watching the end of this game when that over hit. I was telling my dad, I was like, every time I pick Tennessee in an over game, it always hits. And then the game that I was really concerned about or confused why I picked it. I didn't remember picking any. The Air Force Colorado State game under hit there. So big weekend, and not to rub it in even more, Matthew, but this was the best gambling weekend I have ever had. I went 7-0 these 4 picks, and I went 3-0 in the NFL yesterday. So should have went and bought a lottery ticket.
Yeah, congrats on that. Congrats on winning some money. I wish it wouldn't have happened against me, and it also in the same week that I go 0-4. It's a huge point swing, probably the biggest point swing in our pick'em contest history.
Oh yeah. So 20 points on my end, 16 on Matthew's, and I was thinking about it. I never ended up hearing back from the folks we were trying to work out the punishment with. I got to reach back out to them. Otherwise, we got to come up with a punishment. So
yeah, I was thinking about that.
More updates that to come.
I was thinking about that hard since I'm looking very unlikely to win after last week. I was thinking about that, about the Ween challenge or national championship prediction tattoo. Oh God. But hopefully we turn that around this week. Let's just go ahead and move into picks for is this week 10 coming up? Yeah, week 10. All right, so for my favorite, I am going Texas A&M, or they're not favored, but Texas A&M plays at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is favored by 3. I think they're going to take care of business at home there. Texas A&M, I don't have a lot of faith in as a team, so...
I'm going with Notre Dame minus 2.5 points on the road at Death Valley. I understand some of the comments that we've seen. Notre Dame's offense has not been prolific, but with a team, with the athletes that they have and the mistakes that Clemson makes, specifically with turnovers, I don't look for it to be this close.
Yeah, Notre Dame's offense isn't prolific, but neither is NC State's, and they were up 24-7 on us. So moving to underdog, I am staying in the ACC this week, the self-cannibalization league that will probably not hit for me. I'm going Georgia Tech. They're +2 at Virginia. I thought that was an interesting line. Virginia's not looking very good this year. They have that one good win against North Carolina, but other than that, they've looked very poor all season. So I don't really expect the momentum to continue after that. They might have some hangover time after that big win.
Like that pick. I'm going with the service academies, Army and Air Force. Air Force is an 18.5 point underdog to Army. Army is a much better squad, but in a rivalry game like this, I look for Air Force to maybe keep it a little closer than people expect.
I hope so, because for my over, I'm going with Army at Air Force. That's plus or minus 32.5, which is maybe the lowest over under we've ever picked on this show. And I know it's going to hit the under. I just know it is because I picked it, but I just I can't see 32.5 and not pick the over on it. But I know Vegas is
Yeah.
just out there baiting me to do so.
And it's not the lowest point total this week. I believe it was, is it Minnesota, Iowa that
Yeah.
I sent in our group message earlier this week at 29 points. That's just absolutely brutal. For my over, I'm going Ohio State Rutgers. Point total in that game, only 43.
I would have expected that to be higher. That's a good find
Yeah.
there. And lastly, for my under, I'm returning to the ACC. I'm going FSU traveling to Pitt this week. That's plus or minus 51 right now. And I don't know. I could see it sticking with the under, but I'm just going to put some faith in the Florida State offense getting it going.
For my under, I'm going to the SEC. The Missouri Tigers at Georgia. The under is 56 points. I think this might be a little bit tighter defensive game than many expect.
Possibly. I would, it may be in the first half, but Georgia I think might run away with that. But Missouri has looked really good, a lot better than a lot of us thought they would this week. So, or I mean this year. I mean, so let's just get it over with and talk about this Clemson Notre Dame game.
All right, Notre Dame comes to town Saturday. The Tigers lead the overall series 4-3. The record at Clemson is 1-1. The win came in obviously 2015 in the big hurricane game. The loss came all the way back in 1977. The last meeting was last season on November 11th, so just one day on the calendar. Actually, a year and a day separates the last two times these teams have met. Notre Dame won 35-14 there in South Bend, with Notre Dame having a one-game win streak on the Tigers. Clemson's attempting to improve to 14-3 at home against AP top 25 teams since 2011. The Tigers are attempting to record at least one win against an AP top 20 team in Death Valley for the 9th consecutive year. Clemson's last season without a win against a top 20 squad came in 2014, and that's games played at Death Valley.
I just want to butt in here. I just want to
Yeah.
butt in here and say I think it's about time we stop using these since 2011 stats, because it's going to make us look a lot better than we are currently. And it made sense when we were doing it when we were still on the up and at the top of the college football landscape. But as of now, like when we say like, oh, we have the most quarterback sacks since 2012, like it doesn't mean that much anymore, because we had half of the NFL on our roster back then. And I don't know, I couldn't name one guy that's going to play significant time in the NFL on our team right now.
And on that note of NFL lineman, Grady Jarrett out for the season with a torn ACL, I saw earlier today. Clemson is attempting to defeat Notre Dame quarterback Sam Hartman as a starter for the 5th time. Hartman obviously played at Wake Forest. The Tigers beat them 4 consecutive years while he was at the helm there. Clemson is entering the game having rushed for a touchdown in 50 consecutive home games. That is the nation's longest active streak. Now we're gonna attempt to do a trivia question this week. I royally screwed that one up last week, Matthew. So if you'll indulge me, I got a trivia question for you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Who was the last team to hold Clemson without a rushing touchdown at Death Valley?
So 50, the last stat that you read was that 50 consecutive home games, which is going to go back to 2015 possibly. So did we lose at home? I guess we could have won in a game we just didn't have a rushing touchdown in.
It was not in a loss.
It was not a loss. So that's going to make this way harder. I'm going to say it's 2015, but I cannot pick out the game that it was. Maybe I can't even think of any. I'm just going to say I can't even think of a team we played at home in 2015.
Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is Notre Dame is the only team I can think of off the top of my head we played at home that year. But I thought was that not the 2016 season, or was that the 2015 season?
Now you're asking me questions that I gotta think.
I
That was in 2015.
Okay, then I don't think that's correct, but I'm just gonna say Notre Dame 2015 because that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head.
You were close with your math. Is was actually 2016.
Okay.
And the opponent, Troy.
Okay. We have talked about this game a good bit on this podcast, so that does make sense. I remember like our home win streak was creeping towards 50, and the last home loss had been Pitt in 2016. So I was just kind of assuming that the 50th would be in the season prior to that, but I guess the Pitt loss happened in November, so we had already had a few games at home that season. So that makes sense. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry guys.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're working it out. That was a hard one. I would have never gotten that one. There are only 5 current FBS schools to have played Notre Dame at least 5 times and have a winning record against the Irish. Clemson is 4-2 all time against Notre Dame. They are in the company of Florida State, who is 6-5 all time, Michigan, who is 25-17-1, Nebraska 8-7-1, and Ohio State, who's 6-2 against Notre Dame all time. So, some good company to be in with these opponents, especially those Nebraska teams back years ago.
Wait, sorry. And at the beginning, we mentioned that Clemson's overall record was 4-3 against Notre Dame. Is this stat a typo, or is the overall a typo? I can't remember. Ross Taylor's got to get his stuff together.
Let me do a quick little Winspedia. Well, actually, that's where I got the information from originally.
I think the 4-3.
Just a minute ago.
I think the 4-3 is right, but I'm gonna, in this intermission, take a bathroom break.
All right, Matthew's taking a bathroom break. I'm fact checking myself. They are 4-3. Now I'm trying to find that stat.
It's the one that on the show notes is the second to last point.
Well, I'm trying to find it in the actual notes he sent out.
Oh, gotcha.
Because I copied and pasted it, so he might have an error there. The one time that I did find an error that he had, it actually wasn't an error. I was stupid and misread it and actually emailed him, so I looked like an idiot. So I'm gonna leave it.
The reason why I wanted to even challenge this point was just the fact that we might not be in this company anymore of being with Florida State, Michigan, and Nebraska and Ohio State as the teams who have played Notre Dame 5 or more times and have a winning record against them, because spoiler alert for the next few minutes of this podcast, but I think we're losing.
Yeah, well, I did confirm also in this fact he does have it listed as Clemson is 4-2 against Notre Dame all time, which contradict the very top of the page where Clemson leads the series at 4-3.
Well, I think the 4-3 is correct. I remember that happening after we lost to them. So,
well, we're not going to throw any shade at Ross Taylor. He does a good job. We just happened to find a minor mistake there. All right. Thoughts on this matchup, Matthew? Actually, before that, on this date, the game will be played on November 4th. Clemson is 10-5 all time in games played on this date. So history's in our favor, at least here, and the all-time record against the Irish.
Yeah. I think the goal for this game, at least personally, is just to get drunk and have fun. I'm not I'm not going to this game with any expectation of winning, nor do I even think that we're going to be competitive in this game. In my book, we have almost a 0% chance to win, and almost to the point that I'm considering taking my sports betting virginity by putting money on Notre Dame. I've never bet on a sports game, like, actually, other than like our friendly competition and like fantasy football and stuff like that. I've never like put my own money on a sporting event, so I might.
I thought you did one time last year.
Maybe. I don't remember though. I might have talked about it, Do you remember what game
Maybe
it
not.
was?
I don't remember. I just remember sending you the information for the sports book that I use, and I thought you might have, because I know your
Oh
dad
yeah,
did.
I remember. Yeah, I do remember that. I didn't end up going through with it, but that did happen because it was getting to a similar point at last year as it was this year, where we just knew that Vegas was favoring us way too much in games, and it's free money taking the under on Clemson games right now. So do it before Vegas gets their mind right.
Well, the line opened at 3, and some books 3.5 is now down to 2.5. So the line is moving in favor of Clemson, believe it or not.
I even saw somewhere posts like the Circa Sportsbook in Vegas had Clemson as just a 1-point underdog to Notre Dame at one point today.
Somebody sent me that yesterday, and I saw that, but I was like, I've never heard of. It might not have been that book, but there was a book that I'd never heard of that had it like 1 or 1.5.
Well, if it is Circa, that there's one, they have a casino in downtown in Vegas, and I think it's a newer one downtown because it's like way nicer and newer modeled, like remodeled than any other casino on the, not the Strip, but like downtown Fremont Street in Vegas. I don't know if you've ever spent much time in.
Never been.
You've never been to Vegas at all?
Nope.
Oh, well, then that doesn't make any sense to you, because Vegas has like two very popular areas. Like the Strip is where like not Little Caesars, Caesar's Palace,
pizza.
Caesar's Palace and the Bellagio and like all those big casino hotels are on the Strip. But then like a couple miles away, there's downtown, which is kind of like the historic casino district of Vegas. It's Fremont Street, and there's a bunch of casinos on there. But Circa, side note, has a really nice casino out there. They have like a sports room where it's just like 100 feet wide of sports screens, and you can just like walk up there and place your sports bets and go sit in like a theater style seating room and watch sports all day, like any hour of the night. It's really cool. So I think Circa is legit.
Harris Casino in North Carolina has a new sports book with a similar type setup up there that I want to try to maybe at some point this football season, maybe after college is over, and go to an NFL Sunday up there and do that.
Yeah, that would be fun.
And watch there. But one thing that at this point it's just speculation and rumor. I don't know if you saw the text that your dad sent of a screenshot of a tweet that Cade Klubnik has been seen with a boot around campus this evening.
I did see that, but I wasn't sure where this is coming from. I mean, I'd never have seen Cade on campus before, so I can't confirm or deny, but it's pretty interesting if so. Go ahead.
This guy basically said he saw Cade in a restaurant, or his friend saw Cade in a restaurant with a boot on. So a friend of someone who we don't know on Twitter.
Sounds very reliable.
So, yeah. You heard it here first on a podcast recorded on Monday that won't release till Thursday, and by then you probably know the answer. You got a score prediction or any other final thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I had one more thing, and we've kind of talked about it earlier about morale of this team, and I can't think of a time in my lifetime where morale for a Clemson team has to be lower than it is right now. And if we can't get fired up or even like to a point where we could be competitive in this game, then there's not even a point of fielding a team for the other 3 games this year. I don't know. It'd be less embarrassing, I think, if we just forfeit the rest of our games and finish 4-8 than to actually go out and lose the rest of the games. So this one's just very contingent on the season is very contingent on this game for me, because if we go out and embarrass ourselves, I think it's over. It's a wrap for the 2023 season for Clemson, and don't even expect to beat South Carolina.
Well, it had been so long since Clemson has lost back-to-back games in a single season. You're staring in the face 3 losses at the moment. If you don't show up and perform against Notre Dame. When was the last time Clemson's lost 3 games in a row?
Yeah, that
I don't have an answer to that.
I don't either. It might have been 2010, but I don't even know if it happened in 2010.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, score prediction wise for this game, I'm going blowout, 28-3 Notre Dame. Clemson doesn't even find the end zone.
28-3. I saw someone pose the question when the lines were released for this game. They're like, "Does Vegas apparently does not get the CW channel out there based on the way that this line is?" This line has me confused, and I do understand Notre Dame has not been a juggernaut offensively this season with the production that we've seen out of Clemson's defense this year. I could definitely see it being a close game. You do have to factor in the fact that Clemson's offense is going to give up the ball, and Notre Dame is going to get some points off turnovers. I still think that Notre Dame wins this game. I do think that it'll be close, or at least I'm just trying to stick close to what Vegas is putting out there. So I have Notre Dame winning 24-20, and the Tigers head into the Georgia Tech matchup with a potential of 4 in a row in the loss column.
And we're going to be entering a game with a losing record for the first time, well, other than week 2, but for the first time since 2013 in week 2 when we entered with a loss. But, I mean, this far into the season, when was the last time Clemson went into a game with a losing record? It has to be 2006 or 7 or before.
I will say 2021, they did start the season with a loss to Georgia.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that year.
But yeah, no, this late in the season, yes, it's been a long time since Clemson's had a losing record. Uncharted territory for a lot of those 1.5% fans that Dabo referenced. Again, I pose the question, how many losses, Dabo, do we have to have before you're content with the amount of bandwagon fans that we lose? Because right now, 2 in a row doesn't feel good, and 3 in a row doesn't sound any better. So I don't know. You hope that the team will get up for a game like this. The fans will be. I think the fans will be in this game early. And as long as you give them something to cheer about, they're going to remain in this game and be on your side to help as best as the 12th man can. But I don't know. There's been some games this year, myself included, where a lot of people leave at halftime because they don't like what they're seeing out there on the field. So I think the fans will be behind this team, but with a short leash.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And on a side note, before we wrap up, I did just want to point out that I almost got the score right last week. I was 2 points off of the Clemson score prediction. I predicted 22-17 NC State, and it was 24-17 NC State. So maybe we should start doing 1 point in the pick'em contest if you get the score right for your Clemson score prediction.
Yeah, if you get it exactly right, I think that's worth 2 or 3 points.
Okay, I don't think either of us has ever done it. Gotten it right, no. But it would. I think it would be worth it. So,
yeah, I'm open to including that next year. So, but thank you all for listening again. Thank you to Ryan Kantor for joining the show. Join us next week as we review this Notre Dame game and we preview the Georgia Tech game. Thank you for listening. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.
Peace.